All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello, everyone. I'm so excited. Our Thursday show may be one of my favorite shows alongside all the other days of the week. Albert is here.
Albert, thank you.
Kim is here.
Kim, how are you?
And all the kids in the chat are here. It's really, really cool. And this is a momentous day, as you're well aware, in some ways. Some major decisions handed down. Some are problematic. Some are, I would say, something of a relief, but also still may be problematic. I'll get to that in a moment. I've got a law and disorder coming up that is overflowing with news of Carrie Lake, of the Senate GOP standing in the way of any real reform to the Supreme Court. So that's the real law of the land being influenced. We also have a piece of video we've been sitting on for a couple of days that we're dying to get to you. And you'll have a chance to luxuriate in that video in just a moment. Also, some email from listeners and viewers. So we have a lot to do. Let's get it on. I am super excited always to have the commissioner in the mix, and there was a notable passing commission. So first of all, Kelly Malloy, glad to watch live on my Sunday. Yeah, people are on
big shout out.
Big shout out to Kelly. Big supporter of the show is Kelly Malloy. And I appreciate the $5 super chat. And I also want to say I appreciate you stopping through live. We are a 2-hour live event every day. I mean, it is really something that is curated and comes to you live for 2 hours every day.
There's never been anything like this.
Many say there's never been anything like this. And we then love, crave, and enjoy so much those who like to take the show in later. I mean, honestly, no pressure. You don't have to be here live. Check it out anytime. So those who check it out later, you help us as well by sharing the show. You see something you like. We have an analyst on who you feel may say something that you think is important. Once in a while, I say something that's important, or I say something that's loathsome, and you want to share it and, you know, rejoice in how you discovered that this guy on YouTube could possibly say this thing. Share it. And the footprint of the show is slowly growing. We started as a radio show in San Francisco. Now we are, our foothold is really in YouTube. That's where we stay afloat. Although we really stay afloat, as Maud Day will tell you. She says, "Good morning. Today will be awesome." It will be awesome,
Big
Maud.
shout out.
We really stay afloat because of our Patreon and PayPal contributors. So more on that later in the show. There is big news, though. Commish, before I get to your news out of the sports world, Commish.
The Mark Thompson Show.
David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, will be here in the second hour. We'll talk about the SCOTUS decision on mifepristone. We'll also talk about the contempt of Congress decision. They leveled a contempt of Congress judgment against Merrick Garland. I mean, it's laughable were it not so serious and bizarre in this Alice in Wonderland world in which we live. You've got the guy in Jim Jordan and these GOP legislators who ignore congressional subpoenas on J6. They were subpoenaed. So over 2 years, they have flipped the bird to the subpoenas that they were served with. They're finding Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress for ignoring the subpoena that was leveled against him, that he was served with. It's bizarro time. But I want to talk about that with David Katz, and I really want to talk about, just because I'm on the law and subpoenas. And I'd love to talk about the court and a chance to reform the court, the Supreme Court, with an ethics reform package that would have been enforceable, and who stepped in to prevent it from going forward. A GOP senator.
Oh, man.
More on that in a moment. But first,
you would think it would be horribly embarrassing to censure someone or to call someone on the carpet or make a big deal out of something that you just did yourself moments ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
How do you look at yourself in the mirror without being like, am I the biggest hypocrite in the world?
Well, it's about politics and power. How do you look yourself in the mirror when you're Mitch McConnell and the GOP and you say, well, you know, it's 8 months until the election. We can't have a Supreme Court justice nomination now. It's too close to an election. Let's wait and see. The next president will then have that seat. I mean, and then a month before, when your guy's in and a seat comes open, a month before the election, you allow an appointment to the Supreme Court. I mean, to me, that's the hypocrisy that we live with day after day at the high court level. So hypocrisy has nothing to do with it. Looking yourself in the mirror has nothing to do with it. It's a power grab. And so if you're involved in the power grab, if you're fighting for the soul of America, getting this country back to what it was or whatever it is, then, you know, the ends justify the means. And that's really what's happening here. So I'll tip it. It was Lindsey Graham who stepped in and stopped the ethics package from being passed. But more on that a little bit later. Right now, there is big news, and I'm surprised that
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's crippling news because there comes an admission, Kim. There comes an admission that Vicky in Sausalito, first of all, says, yeah, Mark looks great. Well, thank you. I just had a little haircut. Thank you very much.
Girl, you just woo.
Thank you. I feel quite woo. Gayle King is admitting she never should have said Oprah was hospitalized.
What?
Yes.
I didn't know she even said it.
Well, Kim, those of us who are very much following the world of Oprah and Gayle, we all heard her say it, saw it in print, and were quite concerned.
Who is having that conversation?
Days after announcing to the world that her best friend and famous host, Oprah Winfrey, had, quote, stuff coming out of both ends.
Oh, God.
Causing her to miss a planned appearance on Tuesday's episode of CBS Mornings. Gayle King, in full apology mode.
Yeah.
Oh, well, she's come to the right show. For those of you who are new, apologies are our thing. We have a full menu of apologies for Gayle King to choose from. She could go for a simple, I misspoke.
I misspoke.
She could go for the, I stand corrected. That's always...
I stand corrected.
Yeah, that's Whoopi likes that one. I think that that's a good one. We like, my bad, I'm sorry. That was also Whoopi. Whoopi's very good with the apologies. You remember she was like a Gatling gun for a while. She had to crank out an apology every couple of hours. She insulted the Asian community. She insulted the Jewish community. I mean, it was just like she was going after. So
my bad, I'm sorry.
She finally went with that, and I love that. I love that. But Gayle King may want to go... I think my bad, I'm sorry is fine.
My bad, I'm sorry.
We also offer a full Tubin, which is the...
It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
Thank you. That is the... Yeah.
I think it's my words affected so many people.
Oh, that's good. Except, well, maybe they did.
My words upset so many people.
Maybe, I don't know.
You have
doesn't
to think
feel like it quite fits right.
She's apologizing because Oprah's mad.
Of course, and
your
Oprah
bestie
should
does
be
not.
mad.
Your bestie, you have to trust to keep this information quiet.
Thank you. I think there could be an opening for a bestie.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
The Asian community, of course.
Yeah.
Days after announcing to the world that her best friend and famous host, Oprah Winfrey, had stuff coming out of both ends, causing her to miss a planned appearance on an episode of CBS Mornings, King actually said, I won't get too graphic, but needless to say, she ended up in the hospital with dehydration and had to get an IV. Her comments resulted in several news reports stating that Winfrey was hospitalized.
Who is having that conversation?
All of us were having that conversation. That created a stir. It created a problem. It created a ripple in the universe, in the force. Mm-hmm. Well, King has posted a video to Instagram with a chat she had with Oprah Winfrey after the news of the, quote, hospitalization went global. And
I mean,
she wrote in the caption, she wrote simply, Oprah was sidelined with a stomach virus that caused such dehydration that she went to the hospital to get an IV drip. I thought I made that clear, but next thing I know, I'm surprised to see headlines that scream Oprah's hospitalized. She was not. In the video, Gayle King asks Winfrey, it's always not a good sign if you have to ask for forgiveness in an Instagram video. Were you offended because I said what I said about what happened? And how are you recovering? I really didn't think it was a big deal or something that would be upsetting you. Otherwise, I never would have said it.
Oh, no.
Of course, this is the great thing about Gayle and Oprah. They're just they're a couple of girls and they forgive each other. I love it. Winfrey says that her friend wouldn't purposely offend. I know you wouldn't, Oprah says. And I thought you were trying to explain why I wasn't there, and you were trying to do that in a definitive way. And you never miss appearances, and that's the reason the explanation was provided. I was trying to make America the point I was trying to make America was that it had to be something that would keep her from getting on a plane and coming to be with us on CBS Mornings. Okay.
Can you imagine the phone call between those two? That must have been, Oprah,
yeah.
What are you ever thinking? Why would you say that? You know it's going to become a news story. Come on.
Well, here's the bigger news, I think. After the situation was cleared up, Oprah issued a warning for anyone watching. Quote, keep your hands washed. She says that her doctor indicates that the stomach virus she caught can live on doorknobs and railings and other surfaces for 10 hours.
Oh, that's norovirus.
So, yeah. Albert, that's a good tip for you. I know you love those doorknobs and railings. So watch yourself, sir. I really would watch yourself.
What?
Yeah. Anyway, that's the news out of Oprah land, and it is pretty big that the two kids, there was an apology. And
sure.
Maybe it's me, but seems like you finally nailed the lighting, Mark. You look great. I don't know what we did. It's the exact same lighting as yesterday. I really don't get it, but I'm glad you like it, and I'm glad it's working. And as John says, don't use doorknobs or railings is the message to. But anyway, that's the latest from Oprah land, everyone. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
So now to the commissioner, and then I'll get to the heavier stuff. We have a lot. I mentioned the contempt of Congress ruling. I've also mentioned the SCOTUS decision. We have a big law and disorder that includes Carrie Lake. I'll get to all of that. But the commission is here on a day that the world of sports is mourning the passing of someone and also remembering this person as a cornerstone figure in the world of basketball. What can you tell us about the passing of Jerry West and who Jerry West was, Commish?
Well, first of all, he is the logo of the NBA. So you look at the logo of the NBA, that is his silhouette, which is
do we have that up there now, Commish, or can you rally a picture of the NBA? That might have been something that I would have thought I would do if I knew I had to.
That's a great idea. For those wondering.
Yeah.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the
there
hell
it
they do
is.
it
Nicely
for.
done. That is Jerry West. You see the silhouette. He is the logo of the NBA.
Exactly, that's Jerry West. He unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, he made the NBA Finals as a player 9 times, which is impressive. He only won one of those. I think he played against those Celtics teams that were just a juggernaut. So unfortunately, only one title as a player, but he's won 8 more as an executive, which not only was he one of the best players in the NBA, 25,000 points and a long storied career, he's actually, as an NBA executive, important for multiple teams, including the Lakers and my Warriors. So the Lakers recruited Shaq to their team from the Magic years ago, and that was Jerry West's doing. And then also at the very beginning of the Warriors dynasty, he was there orchestrating and kind of getting the team set up for success. So
yeah, so he really had success as an executive, you're saying, in addition to being a remarkable player.
yes. So on and off the court, just an NBA lifer and someone that a lot of people and a lot of players have responded to, including LeBron calling him a mentor, and a whole bunch of other players just saying how much of a difference he's made. He was also an executive for the Clippers, so LA loves him. So he's contributed a lot, and it's a sad loss.
It's an interesting thing. I always, used to do obituaries regularly. I still love to do them because I think you learn a lot about people when you read their obituaries. Sadly, it's stuff that you didn't even sometimes become aware of until their passing. Here's Randy. Jerry West was a great college player, had a remarkable NBA player career, and then had a very successful career as an NBA executive for many years. Indeed, he was born in a coal mining area of West Virginia.
Yes.
In 1938, right? He was the 5th of 6 children. His mother was a store clerk. His father was a machine operator for an oil company and worked for the electrical shop at a coal mine. I mean, coal mine was everything. He was a fierce union man, a rigid disciplinarian. His dad, in fact, it's suggested that Jerry West and the kids in the family suffered at the hands of this guy who was an abusive dad, physically abusive, as a disciplinarian. It was stated, a salty man of strong convictions. But he was shy and introverted as a kid. Intense and complicated is what they described him as. And it was written in one obit that he was most affected by what he later said was a chilly household and the death of an older brother, David, in the Korean War. He spoke of being beaten by his father, raised in a home, a series of different homes, actually, that were spotless, but never had any love in the home, is what's reflected in writings and a memoir that kind of told it all. So I guess he was a college star, but he was a high school star before that. He won the 1956 state championship for East Bank High School. The town, this is how good he is as a high school player. The town renames itself West Bank for a day. It was East Bank High School, okay? They renamed it West Bank because Jerry West was so damn good and led them to a championship. He averaged nearly 25 points a game at West Virginia University and more than 13 rebounds a game. Twice named Player of the Year in what was then the Southern Conference, twice picked as a consensus All-American. He was paired in the backcourt with Oscar Robertson on the gold medal-winning American Olympic team in 1960.
That was actually in Rome, so like almost full circle. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. In his 14 pro seasons, he was named to the NBA first team, All-Stars, 11 times. So,
he also led the West Virginia to a national championship where he lost. So for someone who's finished second a whole bunch of times, it's never affected how great of a player he was. Nobody's doubted his abilities either. So,
well, Albert, the commissioner, did mention, I think, the key thing when it comes to championships, and that is that the Lakers came up with Jerry West and into the NBA Finals at a time that the Celtics were this otherworldly dominant team, and the Lakers just were not able to beat them, right, Kamish?
Yeah, and that was like the beginning of what led to the 80s and that huge rivalry with the Lakers and the Celtics. So just an iconic rivalry, he integral part into it. And he actually won one of the NBA Finals MVP as a loser, actually. They lost the year that he won that NBA Finals MVP. So very impressive.
Wow. Mike is saying Jerry went to bed with a shotgun and threatened his dad for spousal abuse. Wow. Don't know about that. Rest in peace, Jerry West. How old was he? 86 there, yeah. This is a good point. Howard Fineman passed away. Albert, did you know this? Howard Fineman.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Can we move on from Jerry West? Because Vilma points out appropriately, Mark, how about the passing of Howard Fineman? Died today at 75 from pancreatic cancer. He was a great student and pundit on so many things, and really one of the great journalists. So he'd show up in a lot of different shows on panels, and you'd see Howard Fineman in ways independent of his writing. He was an editor and a writer for Newsweek, but he was covering politics in Washington as a print reporter for decades, and then you'd see him on these various panels, Washington Week in Review, MS and CNN, and so you know his face perhaps from some of those appearances.
He did a lot of radio as well. He used to do the Associated Press news report, which ran on some stations.
Oh, is that right? Mm-hmm. That's terrific. The president actually issued a statement. Great journalists hold a mirror up to the nation to reveal the good, the bad, and the truth of who we are as Americans. For 4 decades, Howard Fineman was one of the great journalists of our time. His career covered much of mine, this is Joe Biden writing, and throughout the debates over big issues and historic campaigns, I respected his reporting and insights, whether I agreed or disagreed with him. Where I believe all politics is personal, Howard believed all journalism is personal. No matter the issue or who he was interviewing, he always thought about the people he grew up with in his cherished Pittsburgh, or where he first started as a reporter in Louisville. And then he goes on. It's a pretty lengthy statement. Bravo to the White House and to Biden for putting it out. He understood the fundamental role of journalism in our democracy, it goes on. He understood that fundamental role is to illuminate, educate, and shed light. With his focus on the facts and ability to tell a great story, it's no surprise why Howard was a trusted and respected voice for millions of Americans and true friend and mentor to countless colleagues. Anyway, it is a loss. And the older you get, the younger 75 looks, everybody. That's what all I would say to you. Too soon, too soon. Howard Fineman passes away at 75.
The Mark Thompson Show.
So, review for me, Kim. We have David Katz in the second hour of this show. But otherwise, I can regale everyone with stories of importance, of interest, that affect society, culture, locally, nationally, internationally. Am I right? I can't hear Kim probably because she's muted, but damn it, I know I am right. So
I'm not
girl,
muted.
You just woo.
I don't think I'm muted.
Oh, you're not? No, you're not now.
I unmuted her. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Very,
thanks.
very good.
Thanks, Albert.
There you go. That's well done, Albert.
I blame you.
Okay, Kim, you can blame somebody else, but it was you.
You're correct. You could waste as much time as you want.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
Well, then I'm going to start. I'm going to warm you up with a story, everyone, that I thought would be of interest, especially if you follow the money. Saudi Arabia. They have a lot of money in Saudi Arabia. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I heard they pay cash.
Saudi Arabia pays cash, and they pay cash to our politicians.
Saudi Arabia pays cash.
That's right. They buy our government, and they buy major sporting events up, too. As you know, golf, professional golf, was sort of taken over. The commish can weigh in on this. He's a big golfer, and he followed the Saudi league. They've invested tons of money in professional golf and had a successful league and have a successful league going. They also have invested billions of dollars in soccer, right, commish?
Yeah, and eventually they paid out Cristiano Ronaldo for their soccer league, and then in golf they're actually going to merge with the PGA soon, very soon. They're working out the deals, but I mean money talks, and they're finally crept up into there used to be a whole live golf versus PGA golf rivalry, but they're going to all be one eventually. So
yeah, I mean
that money talks.
Money talks.
Saudi Arabia pays cash.
So now their latest plan. And I'll get to why they're doing this in a moment. My theory, anyway, and I think it tracks. They now want to, having hit golf, as Albert indicated, the golfing world pretty much successfully taken over by the Saudis, and this merger is in the offing. Now billions of dollars in soccer. They now are getting into boxing. There is an ambitious and expensive plan that would reshape the future and even the structure of boxing. And it is in the final stages of approval. They would finance the project, and it's about a $2 billion investment, they say. And it would require that the way in which boxing is handled and structured be reworked. About 200 of the top men's boxers in the world would be signed, and then they would divide them into 12 weight classes. It would be a global boxing league, essentially.
Who owns boxing now?
So boxing is ripe for the takeover for just that reason, because the answer is there are a bunch of different classes and leagues and belts, you know.
Sure.
Aren't I right, Commish? I mean, it's boxing is this weird sort of balkanized world where nobody really handles, these things in other sports, NBA, MLB, golf, etc. There's kind of a course whereby somebody or some team can be declared champion. That is not the case with boxing, right?
It kind of makes it fun because every promotion has their own champion in their own weight class, and then they have these unification type battles, like the best like the welterweight belt versus the other welterweight belt, and then that's the welterweight championship champion. So it's a little confusing if you're not really into that kind of world, and it'll be more streamlined, I'm sure, but that's what Saudi's trying to unify.
So Albert actually enjoys the fact that there are all these kind of different leagues going up against each other.
I'm impressed. Yeah. I mean, Albert, you just know something about every sport. There's nothing we can't throw at you that you don't step up and immediately have knowledge on.
That's true.
You're amazing.
Albert, thank you. Except the show. He has no knowledge of that.
Albert, thank you.
But yeah, he is otherwise very, very good. So the deal is that, as we were saying, the world of boxing is sort of, let's call it disorganized and ripe for the taking. And this way in which they're doing it, the details you can read about and see in the weeks and months to come. But this chaotic world of boxing would now have a coherence to it and an organization to it, and it would be run by the Saudis and run by Saudi money underpinning it all, but obviously a lot of the same characters. I mean, it's not as though it would change its look so much, it doesn't seem.
Well, maybe it's perfect for them, because I heard that they're really...
I lost Kim. Whenever I heard something and then she drifted.
Your connection might be...
It is perfect for them, though, because, as I've said, the other thing about boxing, in addition to it being chaotic, is it's sort of lost its luster. I mean, boxing is not the sport it used to be. You don't really have any super standout personalities like you had, like, let's say, in the 60s or 50s, 60s, and 70s. You had a handful of boxers that, brought everybody in. the Muhammad Ali's, the Joe Frazier's, there were George Foreman, et cetera. The heavyweight division was just filled with these real big personalities and amazing fighters, Mike Tyson, et cetera, Evander Holyfield, so-and-so. So you had Sugar Ray Leonard, and you have some of these other. But anyway, it's going through sort of a period of needing a reboot, and so the Saudis are here. And obviously, you had Oscar de la Hoya and some of these other characters who have moved into promotion, and I think they would be part of this as well. So reconstituting the league under the Saudis would include some of them. But this is the next big billion-dollar sports play from the Saudis. It is boxing. You heard it here. Watch for it. It is part of what the Saudis are doing to, I think, reconstitute their image as players on the world stage in more than just an oil-rich nation kind of way. They're trying to get it out there that this is a culture, a Western culture. We are in this land of crazy Middle East politics. We're with you. We're with the civilized world. I believe, and there's a lot of detail in there, right? But just as an overall sort of banner notion, I think that's what the Saudis are doing, and they're doing it in this interesting way, which is to take over these sports leagues. Sure, there's money in it, but most of the stuff is lost leader stuff. They could have moved into cinema. They could have moved into sort of the Hollywood world, but that would have been much, much more difficult. This is a real bit of genius, actually, to go into this world of sports. You know, it transcends language. It transcends a cultural identity. It becomes something that could very much reflect positively on the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So that's what they are up to. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, I've got a big Law and Disorder to come. Let me see what's happening in the chat. Love the chat. That's one of the great things about the live show. Did you see the New York Times connections puzzle today, asks Copper. The first row choices were smash that like button.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Wow. I did not see that. I love that. Smash that like button.
Smash it with your iron rod.
That's just brilliant, Copper. Thank you. Had not seen it. Thank you. And this is a question. Teacher Lori says, sadly, today's SCOTUS ruling about mifepristone, we were going to get to that in the second hour, was on lack of standing of the plaintiffs so others can reopen this can of worms. I'm going to talk to David Katz about just this issue. I share your anxiety and concern. I kind of hinted at it at the beginning of the show, that even though this is a landmark decision of sorts, and it turns back what was the fear, really, that mifepristone was going to go away, it did it for reasons that maybe leave open the notion that it could still be overturned. That is to say that your right to get mifepristone could be overturned. We'll get into that with David Katz, I promise, in the second hour. From Deb, aloha from Maui. Wow, how about that? Big shout out to Maui and Deb.
Big shout out.
Got married on Sunday.
What?
Wow.
Oh, I saw the pictures and she looks gorgeous. Her husband looks like Brad Pitt. She is the most beautiful bride. I love being Facebook friends with people. This is amazing. The pictures are awesome. Congratulations, Deb.
I love it. Mm-hmm. I love it.
Thompson, party of four.
No, I did not get the invitation. Probably better that I didn't. They had a smooth wedding, apparently. You know, why rock the boat? Kim left us some very kind words on Facebook on our wedding photos. Love the show, and all of you. Thank you, Deb Stevens. Thank you for a 20 in the super chat.
Big shout out.
Again, congratulations to your husband for grabbing such a fabulous woman. And I wish you guys the very best. I'm not really on Facebook much, so I'm sorry that I missed that. But I'm glad that we got to recognize it here. Would have liked a photo. Would have liked a photo. Maybe if you push it around. But you may want to keep your privacy.
That's kind of what I figured. Yeah.
I know what that's like.
I didn't get permission to show her picture, but
do
you know who I am?
Yeah, exactly. Say about her wedding pictures.
I know exactly what that's like. Yeah.
You know when you can feel the celebration and kind of feel the love in a wedding picture.
Oh, sure.
That's her wedding pictures. It's just feeling of joy. Really cool.
I celebrate it.
Yeah.
Congratulations to him, and best wishes to you both. That's the way it is. We've reviewed this before. I mean, this will never change. I understand we've gotten to this place where it's sort of congratulations. You say congratulations to the woman too, but that's not the way it started. Congratulations was said to the guy always, and the idea was congratulations for getting this great girl.
Don't you think that's kind of sexist?
Yeah, probably. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Why would you say? Do you think it's?
Why can't we congratulate
her
her on getting a great guy? I mean, or congratulate them both on finding happiness.
That's what it's become. We've had this conversation already, Albert.
Sure.
Why the F do I have to put up with this
Kim, how are
all
you?
the time? I'm serious, dude. Seriously.
I blame you.
Don't blame me. You're the one who keeps
I
bringing
blame
it
you.
up. I'm telling you.
No, you're the blamer. Mm-hmm.
No, I'll double back to this because this is but that's the way it started. Google it, Kim. Google it, okay? Google it. And you'll see that I'm right.
I don't care how it started. I mean, just because it started that way doesn't mean we have to stay back in the old way.
Well, you know what? You may be right about that. How did marriage start, Kim? Do you know?
Yeah, it was started by women being property. You see how, we've evolved from that as well.
Right. So
now I can actually have my own credit card and own my own house. Who would have thought?
And how's that going, Kim?
It's going great, Mark. It's going really well for me.
That way.
How dare you?
You see,
I don't like to say congratulations to the woman. I don't like to say it. I think it's demeaning. I think it's demeaning,
1920s?
and I'm surprised that you do it, Kim, because you so
we started with a congratulations for Deb, and then we end up fighting again. Why is this happening? I can't understand.
I didn't start the fight. I said congratulations to him and best wishes to you both. And you said, why can't we say congratulations to her too? And I said, well, because then we explained the origins of it.
Uh-huh.
God, if I have to yellow card you again in 1 week, I have to yellow card her twice.
You know what?
Maud Day, $25 super chat. Wow, Maud.
Big shout out.
We adore you, Grady, and love seeing your bird son. This is related to... Do you know what this is related to?
No.
I think I do. I think Grady, who is a great supporter of the show, along with Maud Day, I think he had a bird who passed away.
Oh.
And I think... I only know this. I picked this up just from the chat. I can't watch the chat quite as carefully or, in a granular way as I would like. But I saw him write something along those lines. I didn't know because we were doing a story about a parrot. And I think he lost his bird to some illness or...
Oh, no.
Yeah, I believe that's right. At the time, I'll tell you honestly, I wasn't sure if he was joking or if he... So I didn't realize it was a serious thing. And then later... So I guess Maud taking stock of the fact that it was a serious thing.
Sure.
I didn't see the pictures that she's talking about, but it's so sweet that you would recognize it that way. I think that's what it's about, Maud. So sweet of you.
Oh, yeah. Eileen says Grady lost his beloved bird friend. Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad,
I'm so
man.
sorry.
You know how I feel about animals generally and living creatures of all sorts, and that's just, I'm very sad. Sorry, my friend. Yeah. Nice that Maud would send you those wishes so that we could recognize it here on the show. Wes gives us a $5 super sticker, and thank you for that. And Saudis were big in the bidding pool for the WWF.
Oh.
Wow. How about that from No Contendo?
And
thank
that's
you for that.
I think two Canadian, right?
Oh, is that right?
Canadian? Yeah.
Oh, Oh, it's $2 Canadian. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't know how much that is, but it's
I think it.
Google it.
I don't think we need to check it.
We're international now. We take all forms.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Men control access to marriage. Women control access to childbirth. This was a note to Kevin. This is why the men get the honor and congratulations. Yeah, $5 from super chat from No Contendo. Yeah, it comes out of, and marriage comes out of this tradition, which was a transactional thing, as Kim noted. That's why in the beginning, a woman came with all sorts of inducements for men to have. No, it's true.
I know. It's just so ridiculous.
With all kinds of. It was
incentives
like a marriage
to marry me. This is great.
It was a marriage package. You were essentially buying into package. Like in the old days, if she'd had, money and some flight miles on United, I mean, they would throw it all in, and the guy would go, "Wow, it's a pretty good package. I'll go for it." Okay.
Yeah.
And it was the marriage dowry is something that they had, and so what happened, and we'll wrap up on this, but what happened is we've morphed it, right? We've morphed it into two different things. We've taken away a lot of that stuff that actually might exist in terms of somebody's evaluation of another person. I mean, is their credit history good? Do they seem like a good provider? I mean, one or the other in a relationship might evaluate on those things. Are they attractive to me? Do I feel a chemistry? Whatever the deal is. Do they make me laugh? Do they make me cry? Whatever. Do they write poetry? Are they a musician? I mean, all of that stuff. So now that package has to do with other stuff that's maybe more emotional. But there are also marriages that are transactional. I mean, no offense, Mr. Former President, but I think Melania might have just sized you up, and you may have just sized her up, and you thought, oh, she's right for the job, and you cast your wife in that way. But in any case, marriage is now, and you add the religiosity to it, and it all of a sudden has this sanctity, and with their vows, and, in sickness and in health, and forever, and we write our own vows, and it's a beautiful thing. But let's face it, it's definitely morphed. It's changed. But the one enduring aspect of the marriage world is that you only congratulate the man. Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. And now...
driving me crazy.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Kim's News. And then a law and disorder that includes SCOTUS, Kari Lake, and something is legal in the Bay Area that may become legal elsewhere in America. I'll fill you in on that right after Kim's News. Smash the like button like a boss. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
For some reason, my signal keeps dropping out today. Just starting to let you know there. If I drop out, I'll probably be back within seconds. So that's how we started off. And by the way, congratulations to you, Deb. Let's start with mifepristone. The president is celebrating today's Supreme Court decision protecting access to abortion pill mifepristone. In a statement, President Biden acknowledged the High Court's ruling that allows this widely used pill to be mailed to patients without an in-person doctor's visit. The president went on to say that the fight for women's reproductive freedom is not over, claiming Republicans are planning to ban abortions nationwide. A $60 billion investment by the U.S. in global infrastructure is also being highlighted by President Biden. Here he is, a little smile there. The president appeared alongside G7 leaders during a roundtable event in Italy today. The U.S. and its allies also agreed on a plan to give Ukraine a $50 billion loan for defense and reconstruction as the war against Russia there continues.
I know there's a lot of talk about, Biden and, the way he is, or too old for the job. I've never looked that good. Look at that picture. I've never looked that good. I mean, never. Okay, on my best day, best lighting, never looked that good. Good for him.
Yeah. House Republicans, meanwhile, expect to win November after meeting with Donald Trump on Capitol Hill. Here's a picture of him arriving in his limo. He looks kind of melancholy as he looks out at the Capitol there. But House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke to reporters after the meeting, arguing the upcoming presidential election will be the most consequential election of our lifetimes. Trump also meeting with Senate Republicans, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. He'll also hold a business roundtable where he'll meet with corporate executives today as well.
Well, he is
busy
looking out that window at that Capitol. thinking to himself, all of my supporters, there are thousands of them breaking into that building. God, those were the good old days.
If only we could have set it on fire.
Yes. We'll be back. And this time, no more Mr. Nice Guy.
God, help us all. No. Remember Boeing? You know, here you could see the door plug that blew out of the plane. Well, the head of the FAA says the agency's oversight of Boeing was too hands-off.
You think?
You think? Before incidents involving the company's planes happened earlier this year. In Senate Commerce Committee hearings today, FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker said the FAA should have had a much better visibility into what was happening at Boeing before January 5th. He added the FAA is increasing its use of in-person inspectors, and he will be visiting Boeing's South Carolina factory on Friday. Well, it's kind of a little too late, but hey, better late than never.
We were reporting on this for the last couple of years because we reported on it in the shadow of the crashes in Africa. The fact that essentially they were self-policing. Boeing was self-policing. The FAA had checked out. So the idea that they were too hands-off, yeah, I would say so. There was no federal regulation of Boeing, essentially.
No. We're getting a visitor to the Bay Area today. Yeah, Dr. Jill Biden is coming. Right. She's just hours away from returning to California. Jill Biden will fly into San Francisco tonight for a fundraiser, then attend a political event tomorrow in Los Gatos. She is campaigning for her husband's re-election run ahead of his visit. President Biden will be in Los Angeles this Father's Day weekend, holding a star-studded fundraiser with former President Barack Obama, George Clooney, and Julia Roberts. It's going to be all kinds of Hollywood. Are you going to that, Mark?
There's never been anything like this.
I don't think so.
I mean, do they know who you are? You're kind of a big deal.
Yeah, but I do know George Clooney. So
are you going to be at the Clooney table? No?
Surprised George didn't mention it to me in their last conversation. Maybe he was
Thompson, party of four.
Yeah, I certainly cannot afford party of four in that crew.
Well, big Californians, voters are getting a chance to help crack down on shoplifting. Look at those people just running out of the store with oodles of things. An initiative to repeal portions of Proposition 47 now has enough signatures to make the November ballot and will be certified later this month. The law passed in 2014, reducing some felonies to misdemeanors, including property crimes valued at $950 or less. Critics claim that is why retail thefts have surged. A new measure would raise penalties for those caught stealing or have certain drugs like fentanyl. It also increases punishment for repeated shoplifters. So voters are going to help crack down, it seems like, or have the opportunity to decide.
I can't tell the shoplifters and the mayhem, like in that picture, from the Palestinian protesters and the trash. And I just saw a picture of what's been declared a crime scene at Cal State LA.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary. I mean, to have a business now of any kind, you're vulnerable on so many different levels. Gosh, it's crazy. I really think tough prosecutions have to follow this kind of thing.
Well, voters will decide, Also, on the ballot, in Solano County, efforts to create a new California city, clearing another hurdle. The developer trying to expand Solano County turned in enough valid signatures to get the initiative on the November ballot. Next step is up to the Board of Supervisors in Solano County. They'll decide in 2 weeks whether or not to adopt the initiative or leave it up to voters. They could also vote to order a report outlining the impacts of the potential project before placing it on the ballot. The project, of course, California Forever, the billionaire tech bros deciding to launch this new city in Solano County. Those are the renderings of what it would look like, kind of like Tuscany.
No, I'm sure it'll be great. Yeah, I mean, it's just a bunch of awesome. Rich people, and then the people who work at the rich people's homes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's not really different than any other city.
Yeah, exactly.
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite special. I mean,
I have never heard of something like that.
Well, I'm just saying it's real. It's happening. You know what I mean?
They're having some issues in Florida. Millions of people bracing for catastrophic flash flooding. Nonstop rain in Florida has drenched part of the southern half of the state for days, including Miami. Governor Ron DeSantis declaring a state of emergency there. Wallet Hub
Nice that he could
reveals-
take some time out of the book burning to declare
It
a
really is.
state of emergency down there.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate it. Best and worst states for working dads in 2024. The top 5 best places for working dads: Massachusetts, D.C., Connecticut, New Jersey, and Minnesota. The worst states for working dads: Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, and South Carolina. A Wallet Hub is back at it again with this study. They compared 21 key indicators, everything from the average length of the workday to childcare costs to the overall health of men. Massachusetts reigns supreme because of its great economic conditions for dads. So there you go. And this one for Michael Schur, the Stanley Cup final making its first stop north of the border on Thursday night. The Oilers battle the Panthers in Game 3 from Rogers Place. Edmonton trails the best-of-7 series 2-0 after another lackluster performance in Game 2. Only 4 teams in the NHL postseason history have come back from a 3-0 deficit.
What do you think, Kamish, on that one, the hockey Stanley Cup playoff?
It's kind of crazy how on opposite ends of the country these teams are. It sounds like exhausting to go from Fort Lauderdale to Edmonton, Alberta. It sounds crazy, but it's the Panthers are going to win. The Panthers were there last year, and I think they're getting outcoached, the Oilers. So
yeah, the commish has spoken, everyone.
All right.
That is,
and that's that.
That's my cat's
Good day, sir.
Exactly.
Lastly, gray whales that live off the coasts of Oregon and Washington are getting smaller. Oregon State University research found over the last 20 years, the average adult gray whale is 13% smaller, about 5.5 feet shorter. Researchers say it could be a sign this population of gray whales could be in decline. Smaller whales have smaller calves, and that puts them at risk of other predators. They say the decline in the body length could also be an overall sign about the environment as well.
Oh, my God, yes. Absolutely.
I mean, they're shrinking. Weird.
Yeah, and they're
I
not
guess-
living as long either. I mean, they're just and they're in addition to all the other sort of environmental hazards, they've got the hazards of boat strikes, and the ocean is not a friendly place for them. Their habitat is essentially being toxified, I think. I mean, based on everything I've read.
This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Oh, get it
I
right
love
here,
it.
baby. It's so
I've got my vanilla iced tea today. What's in your Mark Thompson show coffee
This
mug?
is the El Gato. I actually went with El Gato today.
Okay.
And Courtney just ordered some tea there at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com using the discount code MARKT at checkout. It is delicious. Literally the best coffee I've ever tasted. Actually, I got a couple of notes in after hours commenting, people saying that their coffee had arrived and they tried they're super excited about it. The Coachella Valley coffee, here it is from Rev, is probably the smoothest and cleanest cup of coffee I've had.
Yep.
Great sponsor and group of folks over there. I've messaged the Roast Master General Cliff to get a bigger bag of their English breakfast tea. And he takes care of it for me.
Yeah.
The English breakfast tea is probably the best English breakfast tea that we've ever had. And we're Indian, Rev says.
So they know tea.
Yeah, they drink a lot of tea typically, culturally. That's really terrific. I'm so glad it's worked out. Look, as I've told you, I've always been drinking this coffee, and to have them on the show as a sponsor is super cool. And thank you for supporting our sponsor. And thank you, of course, for grabbing as much as you can there at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. You will not be sorry. And always use the discount code MARKT at checkout so that you'll get 10% off on whatever you order on the site.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show. Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Mark
Don't
Thompson.
even play.
Put that coffee
Hey, which one do you use,
down.
Mark Thompson?
Girl, you just moved.
100% effective. How about that?
That's not fake. That's real.
There is no defense for my conduct.
Sayonara, sucker.
Joe Fish, Sal the Shoemaker, Joe Box, and Little Anthony.
Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy. Why are you yelling?
Smash it with your iron rod.
I love it when you're angry. Seriously, what the?
Loving everybody who participates in supporting this show. Thank you. We came here as a radio show that came from, we were sort of refugees from KGO Radio in San Francisco. Now we're here on YouTube with news of all sorts. Albert, if you are still with us, there you. Let us, Albert is our producer of the show. It's kind of a co-producer thing. Kim does a lot of producing too. When she's not fighting with me over stuff she shouldn't.
Albert, thank you.
You're gonna
Kim, how are you?
Another fight, aren't you? There you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's do it, Albert, as we await David Katz, the brilliant legal analyst, former federal prosecutor who joins us in hour 2. Let's do some law and disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
Pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Well, there was an attempt to adopt binding ethics rules for the Supreme Court. They're getting a lot of bad pub lately because of the fact that they're totally corrupt. Taking a lot of money, as you know, the millions of dollars in gifts, in trips, in, I'd say when you buy the mother of a Supreme Court justice a house, that's a payoff, man.
I come from regular stock.
Okay. Anyway,
Private
that's
school, a house bus. I mean, the list is endless.
Yes.
Yeah.
So trying to clean up their image, and of course, Justice Alito and his wife. His wife is a junkyard dog, man. She talks trash, and she's got a plan for America, and it's get back to Christianity and straight white men and straight white women. That's what she's about. But anyway, leave it all aside. Lindsey Graham, the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, he's the guy who blocked an attempt to unanimously pass legislation that would require the Supreme Court to adopt binding ethics rules.
Well, what a surprise that Republicans don't want to stop the money train.
Dick Durbin made the request to bring up a vote on this bill under unanimous consent. So any one senator can block a unanimous consent vote. And Graham was that one senator. Let's be clear, Lindsey Graham said, this is not about improving the court. This is about undermining the court. He said the bill would be an unconstitutional overreach that includes provisions that would harm the independence of the federal judiciary. Again, I remind you now, there is no way to, in any fashion, hold the Supreme Court accountable for the sort of corruption that we've seen them clearly not only vulnerable to, but anxiously grab, both in terms of their philosophical compromises, but more obviously in the last few years, they're the financial compromise, the fact, as we said, that they are being bought and paid for. So this would have allowed for this ethics crisis at the Supreme Court to be handled at least by another body of government. Now, sure, you could impeach a Supreme Court justice, but you'd need a 2/3 vote, and you're not going to get that in Congress. So the 9 justices on the court then remain the only federal officials who are not bound by an enforceable code of conduct. The follow-up on that we'll do with the great David Katz, who will be along. Carrie Lake, she gets another legal setback The Arizona Court of Appeals rejected her latest appeal of the 2022 gubernatorial election loss. This is her little side hustle now. She just goes from appellate court to appellate court saying, I actually won the election. She's like a little Donald Trump Jr. there in Arizona. The former television news anchor launched a legal bid to overturn her defeat to Democrat Katie Hobbs.
Based on what?
Hobbs won the race by just over 17,000 votes. Well, Kim, it's all the illegal votes that she's alleging. All those illegal votes. And she's saying that tabulator malfunctions and signatures that didn't match. It was a plot, Kim, to steal that election from Kari Lake. But the Arizona Court of Appeals, again, rejecting Kari Lake and her appeal for the 6th time. So she may want to find another hobby.
She has no substance. I'll go with the superficial. She really is good at applying blush. I mean, she's got the contouring down. She does a great job at makeup.
I don't like to comment on people's superficial.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and I don't like to comment on women and how they look. But
well,
clearly,
I will.
Kim, you.
Check.
Yeah, all right. But I think she's just. I'll tell you what she's good at. She's good at media because she was a former news anchor. So she really sells the BS. She's very much like Trump. You know, he really knows how to work the room. And that's what she does as well. Okay, now everybody is jumping on the way she looks.
She's right. John says if she used more mascara, she'd look like a young Tammy Faye. I can see it. Absolutely, you're right.
I am not part of this conversation. It is now legal in the Bay Area to do something, and this could catch on. Here is the contagion that I think could truly catch on. San Jose makes it legal to do what? To sell your ADU separately from your home.
How do they do that? It's on the same plot of land.
San Jose becomes the first city to allow homeowners to spin off these backyard cottages as condos. Construction of accessory dwelling units, these ADUs, has taken off. I mean, they're everywhere, and some of them are gorgeous. The new laws make them easier to build, and now this new ordinance will allow them to be easier to sell. It remains to be seen how many people are going to sell them rather than maybe rent them out, which probably makes more sense, you know, just in terms of your ability to control it. But the mayor of San Jose said any new option for homeownership is a boon to the city.
Wow.
ADUs are one of the many solutions to expanding our housing stock, he said. The ability to sell them as their own will serve as an interest in the development of ADUs in the community at large.
Don't you have to rezone it or something?
Sorry?
Wouldn't you have to rezone the land or, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. It would have to be, there'd have to be some, and I presume that that's built into the legislation that you get some 5-foot setback or whatever it might be. There's some minimal amount, I would assume.
Yeah.
But how many ADUs, I want to see if I can find this. I see how many new ones there were. In 2023, how many new ADUs were there just in 2023? How many new ADUs were built in 2023? I will take guesses in the live chat.
Because the restrictions were, the red tape was cut, right?
Right, that's exactly right. Kim is right.
The government was encouraging more.
Yeah.
100,000? That's way too many, isn't it?
It's way too many. The answer is 22,802. Yeah.
I looked into putting one in because I don't want my dad to be alone, and I thought that would be a perfect solution until I saw how much it costs to put up an ADU in your backyard. It can be almost as much as building a regular house.
Oh, sure.
$300,000 ish. You know, and that
surprises me. That's a lot more than I would have thought.
It's a lot.
The ADUs can be up to 1,200 square feet on lots of 9,000 square feet. On or bigger, at a minimum of 9,000. On smaller lots, their maximum size is 1,000 square feet. So if you buy an ADU as a condo, you couldn't like tear it down and build a bigger place. You get what you get. So that's the legislation that just went down, and it's now legal in San Jose. And finally, there's this. His ex-girlfriend is getting $1 million pension fund, and they broke up as a couple 34 years ago.
What?
A decades-old beneficiary has ignited a fierce legal battle. This happened in Pennsylvania. This guy had a hefty retirement account, and his ex-girlfriend, she's now almost 70, is set to inherit nearly $1 million. He wrote out in longhand and designated her as the beneficiary. And oftentimes the longhand written out indicators of who's beneficiary takes precedent over any kind of legal document. So now they're in court. You can imagine the family has some issues.
So did he get married after their relationship? And is that
she
who's fighting
dated
it?
him in the 80s.
Okay.
In 87, he named her as the sole beneficiary, as I said, a handwritten form that he wrote.
Right.
Now his brothers, who only recently learned of this, are taking legal action. And they, I don't believe he did get married. She married someone else. She had kids. But he had a long-term partner, and she was not memorialized in any way that gives her a shot at it.
See what happens when you forget about the paperwork? Come on.
So he was working at a plant, signed up for their savings plan. During that initial enrollment in 87, he listed her as the beneficiary. But their romantic relationship ended 2 years later, and he forgot that he wrote out this paper, right? So she wanted marriage and children. He didn't. She went out and got married and had kids. And now, at close to age 70, she's in for $1 million windfall. And he has passed away, and boom, it's over $1 million that she's in line to get.
Well, that relationship was worth it.
They're haggling it out in court. And that, my friends, is Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
I mentioned to you, you'll tell me when David Katz arrives?
He is here.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm sorry. Then thank you. Yeah. Albert, were you going to tell me that David Katz has arrived?
Albert, thank you.
My God. I was just about to do another story. Very excited. Smash the like button like a boss, first of all. Appreciate the thumbs up.
With your iron rod.
Yeah. And now, without any further delay,
The Mark Thompson Show.
You know this man across the English-speaking world. His analysis of legal matters is celebrated and craved. I'm talking about London radio and television, Australia, New Zealand, in New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco, and Los Angeles. We are so lucky to have regular visits with this guy who breaks the law down like none other. He is the former federal prosecutor. Now he works as a defense attorney in Southern California. How about it for the great David Katz, everyone?
Great to be with you.
David, there's a lot going on. I want to start with the Supreme Court, if we might. This is a big decision that was producing a lot of anxiety about mifepristone, the abortion pill, just to, as it's referred to. And it's the pill used by over 50% of those wanting to have an abortion, and it can be, you can get it through the mail. So it's in front of the Supreme Court, and they now have allowed it to continue to be accessible. But they did it, I think, David, and this is the question I have for you, on the standing of that party that brought the case to the Supreme Court. Can you explain standing again to us? And also, perhaps more importantly, does this then leave it open for mifepristone to be blocked in the future?
Well, Mark, this is the abortion medication. This is the pill. This is the way more than half the women in America get an abortion, not by going in for a procedure, but by taking this pill. It would have had devastating effects if the U.S. Supreme Court had gone the other way. It would have affected women in blue states, where I think a lot of women and men think that maybe they're far away from this madness emanating from the U.S. Supreme Court since Dobbs and since they overruled Roe v. Wade. I also want to take a victory lap, Mark, because I predicted this a couple of times, this outcome, and I suggested it would be at least 7-2. And we joked around that the U.S. Supreme Court would show its big pharma side and not its theocratic side. The standing was actually, this case had poor standing ever since the beginning. In Scalia's famous saying, Justice Antonin Scalia, "What's in it for you? What's your beef? Why are you a player in this game? Why aren't you just a fan who ran on the field? Why are you a player in this game?" And these doctors who brought this lawsuit were obviously not players in the game. This was the case that was cherry-picked. It was run to a federal judge in Amarillo, Texas. You can think of all the things a federal judge should be known for. First in her class, brilliant judgment. This one was known and picked by Trump because he was a Christian warrior. And the case was shopped to this judge in Amarillo, Texas, who purported to enter a nationwide injunction against this pill. And I predicted that pill, that injunction would not last. It would not go into effect. You'll recall the U.S. Supreme Court did not let it go into effect. There have been no restrictions on this medical abortion pill for all of the time leading up to this. And at the time of the oral argument, Mark, it was pretty clear that these doctors didn't have standing. Their argument is that in an emergency, they might be the one in the ER, and they might be forced against their conscience to go perform some emergency procedure because someone had taken this medical abortion bill, and therefore they had standing to complain about it. As Justice Kavanaugh said in the unanimous decision today, there's a medical conscience bill. So if you really are a doctor in that situation, you don't have to perform any kind of procedure that's against your religion. Obviously, the precaution is have somebody who doesn't have your religious moral views on duty in case that happens. But it was statistically so improbable. It was such a stretch to get to that standing that probably only that judge in Amarillo, Texas, would have accepted this as proper standing in the first place. And although it seems very technical, there is an idea that you have to have a lawsuit that's really joined, that's really fought, that's really a case that's going to make both sides put their best foot forward and make every argument that can be made. And a person without standing is, first of all, unlikely to make the best arguments. And so it won't be well decided, and it will become precedent after the best arguments aren't made. And then people say, well, no, it's worse than that. It's really kind of a conservative vehicle to stop the public interest groups from raising issues. And the argument goes, wait a second, if the law is wrong, if this shouldn't be the law of the land, why shouldn't some public interest group be able to challenge it? Standing or no standing, if the law is wrong, why not be able to bring it up? But for decades now, we've had this doctrine. It's often used as a way to cut back on liberal groups. But guess what? Here, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Here it was this very right-wing effort by these doctors trying to shop this case into a particular courtroom in Amarillo, Texas, albeit a federal courtroom, and they came up completely with bupkis, with zilch, with nothing on account of all this. Now, the question that you're going to ask me next, and I guess you did ask me, is who is the proper plaintiff? Who is a player in this game and not just a fan who ran on the field and started saying, wait a second, I don't like this law. I don't like what's going on over here. That's going to be actually very difficult because it would have to be somebody who the FDA told them what to do or told them what not to do. These doctors are not regulated by the FDA. whether mephistoprone is a legal drug or not in blue states and red states, whether the FDA properly engaged in this analysis that these expert agencies like the Food and Drug Administration engage in. There has to be some action that actually they're told to do or told not to do. So that's why I think Kavanaugh said as a sop to these plaintiffs, well, you can always go to the legislative process or like get Congress to pass a bill. You can always go to the regulatory process, try to bring this next time this comes up to try to have the FDA analyze, let's say, a new version of this pill. But the reality of this, Mark, I see this whole thing is totally made up, totally nonsense. The FDA is an expert agency. They did all the tests. It's too long ago when they first allowed this drug on the market. They can't complain about the drug being on the market. But then they did revise the rules so that you could get it by telemedicine, so that you could get it without having to go to a doctor, because sometimes the doctor's 200 miles away. So it's quite a restriction to make you go to the doctor or not get it by telemedicine. That was the new one. That was the one that it looked like might actually be in trouble of being enjoined and affecting the blue states. That's not happening. So all I can say is that the next time this comes up with maybe something that makes it even easier to get this medical abortion, that's when the right wing will take their crack at the FDA. And even, let's say, if Trump is back in office, even if Trump has appointed the head of the FDA, I don't see this happening because, again, that's the issue we started with. That's big pharma. They have billions of dollars invested. If you can do this to the makers of this drug, you could do it to the makers of the cancer drugs, the blockers, everything else. Billions of dollars are invested. Big pharma is way behind this. The idea that some judge or even some appellate court somewhere in the federal system can block that drug and suddenly make it unmarketable or unsaleable throughout the nation, or even in that particular appellate area where that court is, I don't think the U.S. Supreme Court's going to buy into this. Even if Trump's in office, even with this U.S. Supreme Court that we have, I think this is going nowhere.
So women will have access to mifepristone for all the wrong reasons, it sounds like, basically, because of the power of big pharma to protect it.
Sometimes the way you get there is not as important as that you get there. And in this instance, this involves so many women, their lives. It's often poor women. It's often minority women. It's women who have nowhere else to turn. It's women who are in Louisiana or in the South and can't get off work or can't get the money or can't get a car to drive them hundreds of miles. They can get this at the local pharmacy. And they can get it prescribed by telemedicine. And besides, I don't think it's not one of those just the ends justify the means. The standing doctrine is good for the goose and good for the gander. It stopped an awful lot of challenges from liberal groups. So it stopped a challenge from a right-wing group that really didn't have standing. They really didn't have a dog in this fight, except they were an advocacy group that desperately wanted to be in this fight against women's right to choose, even to choose a pill.
David Katz, that comes from SCOTUS and the attempt to get SCOTUS to adhere to enforceable ethics regulations or guidelines. That has been derailed. It was derailed by one senator, Lindsey Graham, today. We're just talking about it. I wonder if you can give me some thoughts on that. It's an odd place that legislators find themselves in when they don't want to back any kind of guidelines that are enforceable for the Supreme Court.
Well, I'm not so sure with the separation of powers how far the legislative branch, that is Congress, can really go in imposing rules. And I know I sound like an idealist, but we need checks and balances. So in this instance, maybe we need a check and balance that comes from the U.S. Supreme Court itself. People are very loath to have restrictions on their own conduct, right? We've all seen that hypocrisy. People think that, well, this is great, we should have rules and regulations for that. And some of the most rules-oriented people, when it comes to their own conduct, Mark, haven't we all seen that? This hypocrisy that they then do not want to actually be reined in by rules that they think are so great for other people. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court's 9 human beings. And under our system of checks and balances, it's very hard to see what, lower federal judges, I just said it, they're lower federal judges. They can't tell the U.S. Supreme Court what to do. And other branches of government, it's very hard. I said this before, you can get prosecuted for income tax violation or other kind of crimes if you're a U.S. Supreme Court justice. That does not violate the separation of powers. We've seen senators who are members of the legislative branch criminally investigated by the executive branch. We've seen some federal judges, let's say, who haven't paid their taxes at all or have, major criminal federal problems. We've seen them not only prosecuted, but we've seen them impeached. Those are actually some of the impeachment cases that we've seen. And there've been a lot written about the gifts that Thomas took. What are the possible criminal implications? What are the federal income tax implications of what Thomas has done in particular? And I leave that to other people who may have investigated it. But I don't think it's a good precedent. I don't think the way to solve this problem is that every now and then we have an attorney general of one party going after a U.S. Supreme Court justice that was picked by the other party. Boy, that does look a little bit like a banana republic, in countries like Hungary and so forth. Certainly in Russia, the judiciary is totally emasculated. And they end up being completely at the whim of political figures who always threaten them with some kind of criminal prosecution, right? So I don't like that system, but it is very hard to see if the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't endorse ethics rules for itself, how we really get there to an enforceable system. People say, why don't you write to the Chief Justice? He has the title of the Chief Justice, but he has no reign or sway over the other 8 any more than Thomas has sway over the Chief Justice. Does the Chief Justice have sway over Thomas?
That's wild. I mean, it's just that last part where the Chief Justice essentially has, he couldn't impose ethical guidelines that would be, enforceable in any way. It's fascinating to see the open corruption that we become aware of, David, both in terms of the monies taken and gifts received, but also the open corruption when it comes to the flags above the Alito house, the comments of Alito and his wife, the 2 wives. I don't mean to, make this about the wives necessarily, but it is wild. Clarence Thomas's wife was involved in the effort around J6, and Alito's wife very much, flying the flags above the Alito house. I believe that, he was involved in that as well. But that said, that you can't even get them to consider recusal on such matters, even though, they have made their feelings on these things clear, at least by proxy, through their wives and through their actions and statements.
I was stunned by Mrs. Alito's comments. First of all, if you talk to someone at, the U.S. Supreme Court Historical Association, where all these random people are there, even if they are vetted, you don't talk to people who are, quote, vetted as openly. Mrs. Alito and Justice Alito didn't really know that lady from Adam. And here they are talking about all of those things. They're very public figures. I find no fault at all. Justice Alito never ran into a sting that he didn't like. If this had been done against any kind of, low-level grifter, they would have thought this was the greatest thing in the world, all fun and games. Remember like on NYPD Blue, where they always had some clever way to get the skell to talk and to avoid him having a lawyer and to do some clever undercover thing. Well, as I say, Alito loves all that. Well, what goes around comes around. So somebody wore a wire on him. I think it was even legal in that situation. I don't think that there's a one party, because I'm not sure in Washington, D.C. or where the function was held. But Mrs. Alito's comments out of her own mouth, she wasn't agreeing like Justice Alito was with a comment about, we need to return to godliness or whatever it was that she said, and then he affirmed that, okay? But she, out of her mouth, as I understand it, Mrs. Alito, to basically a complete stranger, said about the feminazis. That's just unbelievable that a U.S. Supreme Court justice's wife would call, people feminazis. That's what Rush Limbaugh's old term. It's incredibly demeaning, incredibly unfair to call anybody a Nazi. If you go and you call Trump a Nazi and you say that things he did were comparable to things that Hitler did, he rose to power, people just go out of their minds. And then a U.S. Supreme Court justice just glibly calls, women that she doesn't agree with politically feminazis. To me, that was astounding.
And for those who don't know, she talked about those who are critics as feminazis. She described her critics as feminazis. That's what David's talking to. And she threatened libel lawsuits against the press. She reacted to all of this. And she also, you get this toxic resentment from her. She said, I want to because she didn't want the LGBTQ pride flag flying near their house. She says, I want a Sacred Heart of Jesus flag. This is a quote from her, because I have to look across the lagoon at that pride flag for the next month. When are you free of this nonsense? I'm putting it up. It's a... yeah, I mean, look, they clearly, there's nothing wrong with the notion of being a fundamentalist religious people, or, I mean, you know, if that's their way, but it seems to inform a lot of their life and now their judicial decisions as well.
Yeah, I just think that it's you know, it's very unfortunate, and you know, that if people think, and of course they already do after Dobbs and after so many other decisions, you know, we talk about Chief Justice Roberts as a moderate, and you know, he is a moderate on this court. He's also the author of Citizens United. He's in with the Second Amendment cases that, you know, for hundreds or over 150 years, people thought that the right to bear arms had to do with the militia, which is mentioned in the Second Amendment, along with the right to bear arms. It mentions a militia. So this is Roberts, but I mean, Alito is so far out to the right. One of his comments, we can get on to another topic if you want, but he was blasting ProPublica. Say it again, Mark.
Yeah, ProPublica. Yeah, you had it, right.
He was blasting them as, you know, they have big donors. Now that is so rich because, you know, Salmon Alito, who took that free flight for the salmon fishing up there, there was just room on the plane with some billionaire. So he jumped on there. I don't think he paid for the trip. I don't think he did anything that you or I would have done to have any sort of trip like that. And of course, Thomas took those millions of dollars of private jet, you know, flights and incredibly expensive cruises with his wife. All that money from the right wingers, that right winger who bought some relative's house, who put another relative of Thomas's through school on the billionaire's nickel. And the billionaires, of course, have issues before the U.S. Supreme Court, don't they ever? For Alito to say that, wow, the left-wing organizations have big funders, it's just unbelievable. I mean, he's just supposed to be a smart guy. He seems to have lost all sense of perspective on these kinds of issues.
You know, and just the last thing, then we really will move on. But the idea somehow that I believe, and you can help me remember this, but that he would invoke in his Dobbs decision, he wrote the opinion, a law from hundreds of years ago, and a reference to clearly a religiosity or a belief in, you know, in the spiritual realm that somehow informs a legal decision that affects America today. It tells you a lot about his biases and how these decisions, how he comes to them. He sort of reverse engineers them and then searches for hundreds of years to find some reference from a judge who believed that, you know, bleeding patients to death was the way to, you know, get them. It's crazy. It's witch hunt stuff.
Yeah. Are we going to get to Hunter Biden? I know it's
Mark, can you do this? Maybe do this on your own time. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, not at all.
Let's get.
No, I'm going to make news. I'm going to make news on your show because I think that President Biden, no matter what he says, will at the very least commute Hunter Biden's sentence. I think he may actually pardon him, but I think that he will commute his sentence, and I'll tell you why if you'd like.
Please.
I think it's just sort of the chess moves. And one thing, it begins with the Delaware case. The Delaware case, now that he stands guilty, you know, found by the jury, Hunter Biden, the sentencing guidelines, which is, you know, I've heard so many people comment on this and they discuss it politically and philosophically. A lot of it is geared to the federal sentencing guidelines. They were passed in the 80s. The liberals actually backed them. Teddy Kennedy backed them. The idea was it would rein in the hanging judges. It would make them go by some sentencing guidelines. And of course, the Reagan administration that I was working for then was very much in favor of the federal sentencing guidelines because the bleeding heart judges would have to give prison sentences. And basically, the federal sentencing guidelines say that if you get involved in any kind of serious white collar case, one that the federal government will prosecute in its discretion, you pretty much have to go to jail unless you have some very extraordinary circumstances called a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines or variance. Or if you cooperate, that was one of the goals, was to get people to cooperate in those cases. So to either make them look at a guideline sentence of 7 or 8 years, or to pass a mandatory minimum that said you have to get 10 years, that would induce somebody to take the risk of testifying against the capo, testifying against the higher up person, even in a dangerous drug ring. 10-year mandatory minimum, 8 to 10 years under the sentencing guidelines. Let me tell you what Louis did, how he told me to bring the drugs in. So that was one of the big things in the sentencing guidelines. One of the things under the sentencing guidelines is you get a couple of points off if you plead guilty. And they have always said forever in all the cases say that they're not burdening your constitutional right to go to trial. They're not punishing you for going to trial, but they are rewarding you every time you don't go to trial because you get these 2 or 3 points off, the 2 points automatically, and usually you get the 3 points off. Hunter Biden is not going to get that. Whatever Hunter Biden did 5 or 6 years ago when he was a crack addict and he signed that form, I think the way the federal judge is going to look at it is, number one, you took down that turned down that sweetheart deal in my court. You did that about a year ago. You can't just blame your lawyer for that. I think in her mind, she's going to think, no, you were a participant in that decision, Hunter, and you turned that down and you decided to take your chances with the prosecutor.
That was an 11th hour move, though. Wasn't the judge involved in that, kind of saying, hey, you should look at this? No?
A lot of people have misinterpreted that. And so I want to talk about, let me just finish that one point. So since the sentencing guidelines are 15 to 21 months in prison, almost all the experts agree that Hunter Biden's sentencing guidelines now are 15 to 21 months. He's not going to cooperate, so he's not going to get a departure for that. He didn't, plead guilty, the absolute opposite. And so he's not going to get the 2 or 3 points. He's at 15 to 21 months. I argue to courts all the time, look at the extraordinary post-offense rehabilitation of my client, which is exactly Hunter Biden's argument. Look at him today. Look how much he straightened up his life. It's so commendable. He's not the person he was 5 or 6 years ago. I argue that, I think about as well as you could argue it to a federal judge. And I'm not batting 100%. I'm batting below 50% on that argument. I'm probably batting, if you actually count them up, worse than below 50% on that. It's very hard. Judges think everyone has that argument. On a tax case or a white collar case, almost all the cases are 4, 5, 6 years old. That's when the conduct occurred. Then the investigation took a long time. The trials took a long time. Trump isn't the only person in America who's gotten his white collar case delayed a lot. Of course, we're all outraged by, how he's done it and, all that. But it's normal if there's not, the election pending and that on the public interest side, it's normal to have cases delayed 2 or 3 years while they're in court. That's after the couple of years for the investigation. So the defense normally has that argument. So that's why I don't think it's going to go well for Hunter in that sentencing. I don't think there's any reason why the judge is going to say, we also decided about a month or 2 ago to take that case to trial on what I think the judge will say was about a 5 or 10% chance of winning. If everybody in America in federal court took their case to trial with a 5 or 10% chance of winning, we'd have this huge congestion of the courts. And so there is this sense of, look, if you got a case that really was triable, try it. Sure, that's your right. I'm into it. But for Hunter's chances of winning, 2 or 3 days after he signed the form, he was out there trying to get crack again. I know what he's going to say. I know what his defense was. His 5 or 10% chance of winning was that at the time I signed the form, I saw myself as a recovered person, not as an addict. And I saw myself as someone who was not unlawfully using drugs because I wasn't using them today. And if he'd never tried to get drugs again and he'd gone through a formal rehab, maybe. But when you take the facts of this case, which were known to Hunter and known to his lawyers, and he decided to try this case, I think the judge is going to give him a prison sentence. Now in the fall, he has to come out here to Los Angeles and appear in front of a very able Trump-picked judge, but very able, very fair, in my experience, in front of that judge. I think he's going to give Hunter an absolutely fair trial, and Hunter's going to go to trial again, isn't he? He's going to go to trial again. There's $1 million of back taxes. I know that people have said there's only a few hundred cases a year. First of all, there's more than a few hundred cases of federal income tax evasion across the country in a year. It's not that unusual, and the amount's not small. You can say the case in Delaware was kind of a one-off. What was that all about? Why'd they bring that charge? But the one in Los Angeles is $1 million. Some of it's underreported. They're going to try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And in some of the years, Hunter had, it seems like, hundreds of thousands of dollars in gross income and didn't even file a return. Those cases get prosecuted. Mark, he can't say this is something anomalous. So that leaves President Biden in a situation where his son is likely to have a prison term, and he will be able to do something about it after the election in November. Let's take two different scenarios. Biden loses. The idea that Biden is going to let his son go off to federal prison with Trump in office, with Trump appointing the head of the Department of Justice, with Trump appointing the head of the Bureau of Prisons. If you remember how Trump just about tortured Michael Cohen, how he made Michael Cohen try to give up his First Amendment rights so he could get out of prison a little bit earlier when the prisons were full of COVID, when Cohen was facing a death sentence. When Biden looks at that and thinks, wow, Trump's going to be in power, pointing the head of the Bureau of Prisons, and my son's going to be in prison. I'm going to drive up to the prison every other weekend to visit my son in prison when I could have commuted his sentence. Boy, I don't see it. And if Biden wins, that's a different kettle of fish. Maybe if his son doesn't get any prison time, he'll wait it out. But again, I just don't see him being president in a second term and going to visit his son in prison when he could have done something about it. Two more thoughts on that. Clinton, pardoned his half brother, didn't he? And there's a pardon power. And if you don't use it for your own son in this situation, his son didn't kill anybody. He didn't there's no violence. There's no nothing like that. There's no betrayal of the national anything like there is in the Mar-a-Lago case as to Trump. Boy, I just don't see how, if there's a pardon power, which there is, and it basically can be used for any purpose. I think also Joe Biden will have immense pressure from the rest of the family, just as I think Clinton probably had when Clinton issued the pardon to his half brother. I just don't see it. So that's the news that I'm making. Now, can we go back to Delaware?
No. Stop. My God, I think you just absolutely made a lead pipe cinch case for why Hunter would be pardoned. There's, in both scenarios, I'm just doing this for myself. The information from you comes quickly. I just like to review it for myself. The notion that if he loses, that he would pardon Hunter makes total sense, 100% sense. Like, why wouldn't you have nothing to lose at that point?
He's going to leave him to Trump's tender mercies. He's going to leave his son to Trump's tender mercies.
And then the other point that you make is, and if he wins, at that point, you have nothing to lose either. I mean, I kind of feel like, I don't know. I see the pardon of Hunter as inevitability. And now just my quick question. So thank you. I think you made a really good case for that. I mean, meaning a case for the prediction. Tell me what the difference between a commutation and a pardon is.
The commutation just knocks out the prison term. It leaves all the other conditions of the conviction in place. So if you can't have a gun, you still can't have a gun. If you have 3 years of probation supervision, you still have 3 years of probation supervision. The commutation just knocks out the served time in prison part of it. Let me just talk about Delaware because, this has been spun so much. And, I have political preferences like everyone else. I supported Biden. I supported Biden over Sanders. I thought he was the guy who could beat Trump. When he was at 7% mark, I'm on the air with people like snickering at me, and I'm supporting Biden. I support Biden against Sanders supporters. I supported him all the time against the right wing. They used to pair me off, and they would snicker at me about Biden. I thought Biden was the right guy. I thought Biden would win. I'm all in for Biden this time politically. Okay. But I just think that's my opinion on that. And I think one thing that's so strange to me is that Hunter Biden has been acting like a guy who knows he's going to get a pardon or feels very, very strongly he's going to get a pardon. And let me say why. I am a federal criminal defense attorney. Between this and being a prosecutor, Mark, I've done this for 35 years, okay? I've seen people on both sides of the aisle face these situations. The sweetheart deal in Delaware was so sweet, it is very hard to understand how any competent, smart attorney would have done anything except say yes. Quickly, yes. He was going to get the case that's pending now in Los Angeles federal court that involves about $1 million of unpaid or even unreported taxes. And then somebody came along, this friend of Biden came along, a friend of Hunter Biden, this Hollywood guy came along and paid millions of dollars. That is totally unpersuasive. The idea that you can get out of a federal criminal income tax case by paying your taxes later, that's ridiculous. The whole idea of deterrence is that people do this because they think they won't get caught. If you take the one person in 50 who gets caught and say, Okay. He's like, oh, you caught me now? Hey, wait, here you go. Here you go. Here's some money. I borrowed from my friend. I sold a piece of property. Here's the $1 million I owe you. That doesn't get you anywhere with the IRS. The idea that because he was able to pay from this friend's money, that he's going to get some kind of a break. So you say to yourself, here was a guy who was going to get a misdemeanor and going to get a pretrial diversion. And here were his two problems. Here was why it fell apart, blew up in court. I was commenting on it at the time. I remember it so well. I went back and reviewed it. They said, look, maybe the probation office will be a total jerk. The probation officer will go after Hunter Biden because he's a famous person or whatever it is. You know, that sometimes happens. You think you'd be ahead of the game by being really prominent in the system. This happens to some lawyers who become so prominent. I'm not one of them. There's lawyers who become so prominent that, you know, prosecutors think, oh, well, you know, they're so-and-so, you know. You don't want to be that famous. That, you know, I mean, Johnny Cochran had that problem. As soon as Johnny Cochran walked into a courtroom after OJ, people had all this stuff go through their head, which wasn't about the case, but it was about Johnny Cochran. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that when he turned that down, you think, why on earth would he do it? He couldn't possibly, being acquitted in both cases after spending millions of dollars on his defense was not really a whole lot better than the misdemeanor. He's going to be on misdemeanor probation. He wasn't going to go to jail. So that was the one thing. The probation office may be a real jerk. So they said, Judge, we want you to decide in the first instance whether there even is a probation violation. She said, that's not my job. I'm a federal judge. Besides, I decide whether there was a federal probation violation as the final arbiter. I'm going to be the first arbiter. I'm the final arbiter. I'm the judge. Probation office sends me a report that says you're in violation of probation, Hunter, and the person's a jerk. There's no basis for it. I'm going to throw it out. That's it. I'm going to adjudicate it. So what else you got? What's your other problem? And the other thing was they said that the agreement had been written in a way, and the defense thought they were being very clever, that this would give him immunity in the future as to some China dollars, as to some investigation with daddy and all this kind of stuff. And they made it very clear, no, it's not giving you immunity for that. And that's when Hunter Biden's attorney said no deal. It was not worth losing that deal. It was not worth losing that deal over either one of them. They should have walked over to the prosecutor. I would have, you asked any criminal defense attorney, posit these facts. What would you have done? I'd have said, you know what, the probation thing, you're right. The probation office, the judge is going to decide that. And the other thing, guess what? I didn't do anything wrong. You guys come after me for some kind of corruption in China with my daddy, the Biden crime family. Bring it on. Bring it on. We'll defend that. But it was obvious that that agreement, if it did not have that interpretation, why on earth would the special prosecutor have agreed, we're going to give you a pass on the China stuff with your daddy, Ukraine, all that kind of stuff that Congress is investigating, the Republican Congress going nowhere. They have a star witness who blew up in their face. They're nowhere. That's garbage. And to lose that deal, Mark, over not having immunity for something that they weren't really in danger of was so arrogant. It was so overplaying their cards. And I think to myself, I'm a Biden supporter, Joe Biden supporter. I think to myself, why on earth would Hunter have turned that down? Except he thinks, maybe he thinks wrongly, that he thinks that he's never really facing peril of prison anyway.
That is such a well-argued and well-reasoned argument. Wow. Because
and
it was...
on you. This wasn't rehearsed. I sprung this on you.
It was excellent, and it makes total sense. And it doesn't reflect well on Hunter, to be honest. It doesn't reflect on, I mean, you know, there's an implied arrogance or, you know, whatever you, overconfidence, you know, maybe, but...
including recently, not 6 years ago, not 5-6 years ago. Everyone should be sympathetic what happened to him 5-6 years ago. And I think in a perfect world, he wouldn't have been charged with this, because it seems to me like this was, you know, Trump always says they're looking for me. They're not looking for a crime. This did look a little bit like they were looking for Hunter, not looking for a crime. This is this form thing is really weird. It's true. It's not prosecuted much. It seems almost like selective prosecution. But, you know, if they're going to bring that motion that it was selective prosecution, I think it's been denied. As a legal matter, selective prosecution, very, very hard to prove.
In our last minute or so, I really just don't want the visit to go away without us talking about the Merrick Garland contempt of Congress vote. Republicans are punishing him for refusing to turn over the audio related to President Biden's handling of classified documents. So the rich part of this is that some of the people involved in this very action to hold Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress are themselves in contempt if you hold the same standard, that is to say, honoring a subpoena that you were served with, because it's just the fact that you've got, most of that crew out of GOP land voting in contempt of Congress for Merrick Garland, who they themselves just didn't honor the same kind of subpoena. You could almost erase the name of Merrick Garland and put in the name of Jim Jordan or whomever. Could you speak to this, and what does contempt of Congress mean? If you look in your Funkin' Wagnalls, under the word hypocrite, you'll see a photo of Jim Jordan. It's astonishing. This the hypocrisy that we're talking about. Number one, Attorney General Garland hasn't done anything worthy of a contempt citation. Number two, no one is going to prosecute this in the Department of Justice, and no one should prosecute this. And I don't know if they try to impeach him, which I guess is the next thing they could try to do, like they tried to impeach Mayorkas. It'll be, voted down in a second by the Democratic Senate, as it should be. The only thing that's sort of an issue, Mark, is that they do normally turn over recordings, right? So they've turned over a transcript of what President Biden said during the 5 hours of interviews with the special prosecutor, but they haven't turned over the actual audio. Now, what they say is that, well, we need to hear the audio. I mean, this is abnormal. You turn over a transcript, you should turn over the audio. Like if one of your listeners said, Mark, you're showing the transcript, why don't you play it? There is sort of this logic, and that's why the Republicans think they can get away with it. They're going to argue, why don't they play it? There must be something terrible on it. But there's nothing terrible on it. What they want to do is there's going to be situations where Biden pauses, where he seems to be doddering in his speech. And they want to play that over and over again during the campaign, just like the Democrats want to play those 3 minutes of Trump the other day. If you want to see somebody who really does not have the mental acuity to be the president, listen to Trump for 3 minutes about the outboard motor, he'd rather be electrocuted than eaten by a shark. Yeah. On and on it goes. But this is why they really want it. And what the Department of Justice says is, look, whatever you're investigating whether Weiss did his job properly. You're investigating whether Biden should have been charged because Biden had those documents at home. How does hearing him say the things that you have a transcript of possibly be relevant to that investigation? So they're standing on relevance, and courts do that. If you don't have any purpose with a court why something is relevant, they say if all you want to do is make a big show, and how is that relevant? Maybe it's relevant to how with it Biden is, but that's not what Congress purports to be investigating. They purport to be investigating whether Weiss properly did his job or whether Biden really should have been indicted for having those documents, which, of course, to state the obvious, the man who should be indicted for wrongly taking, wrongly holding, and obstructing justice with regard to top national security documents is Trump, the guy that these hypocrites race to defend, even with all the things that he did at Mar-a-Lago. So to me, it's just totally politics. And now, well, it's clearly totally politics. But what you're not doing your job. You're not doing your job as Attorney General if you don't get indicted. They indicted the last three. They've indicted Holder. They indicted Barr, and now they've indicted Garland. It's like you've totally failed at the job of being America's Attorney General. If you're not doing your job as Attorney General unless you're getting indicted is the greatest line of the day. But it's obviously political. But what you said is no. But there is a legally defensible position here for Merrick Garland to not release that audio. Right, and it has no relevant purpose to anything that Congress is investigating. And by the way, if I said indicted, held in contempt, all three were held in contempt by the other party when they were in control of the House of Representatives. Holder, Barr, and now Garland, held in contempt by the opposing party in Congress. So it's really become par for the course. I don't think anyone's paying attention to this. I think people are still interested in Trump and what Trump's sentence is going to be. I predicted already that I don't think that he's going to get any prison time or even home detention time.
But he had to have an interview with with the pre-sentence officer, which is so amazing, Mark, because this is what I do for a living. I go to those interviews. It's like suddenly we're talking about pre-sentence interviews and the former president of the United States. It kind of snaps your head back.
But your clients can't Zoom in. They have to actually go, don't they?
Actually, during the pandemic, they could Zoom in, and I always go to the interview with my client. That's totally normal. I don't know, maybe not under New York law. Maybe that's a little unusual. But certainly,
do you typically say anything in those back and forth, or are you just kind of there in the room?
I'm there in the room, but if we're getting into an area, what normally happens is you don't have your client talk about the offense. Either your client went to trial. Of course, if they're found not guilty, you don't need to go to one of those pre-sentence interviews. I've had 4 of those where my clients were completely acquitted. That got them out of court completely, including the pre-sentence interview. But if there's a conviction, yes, you have the pre-sentence interview. Then you don't want your client to talk about the case because you want to preserve the record. Maybe your client hasn't testified at the trial. Now you're going to suddenly you're going to suddenly talk about the offense that you haven't talked about. You're going to talk about it with the pre-sentence officer. Or your client has pleaded guilty. If your client's pleaded guilty, there's a factual basis in court. Normally it's written out. My client admits that he did X, Y, and Z. And so you don't want to talk about the offense then either because there's a record and you're relying on the record either for sentencing or you're relying on the record for the appeal. You don't want to make more of a record by talking about the offense. So in federal court, they understand that the client's not going to talk about the offense at all during the pre-sentence interview. And so one of the things that you're there as the attorney to do is to monitor it. I want to say one last thing because this is how Machiavellian I think Trump is. I think Trump may want to talk about some things like I did not sleep with Stormy Daniels and malign Stormy Daniels, figuring that someone's going to leak that report. And he's going to say, no, you can't sue me for defamation. I was forced to speak. I was asked a question. I had to answer it. The judge forced me to go to the pre-sentence interview, and he's going to try to get around the defamation. My prediction is that he'll make defamatory statements in there and claim that he was forced to speak because the judge ordered him to participate in the pre-sentence interview.
That is wild. That is great. David, I love our time. I know it's done. Thank you for being so generous with your opinions, with your analysis, and with your time. Really enjoy it.
I'm going to hear from Hunter Biden's fans, aren't I? I was trying to give my best legal analysis. That's my best legal analysis.
Yeah, you make a pretty good case for the fact that he's expecting the pardon, and he will likely get it. All right, David. Appreciate it. David Katz, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much, my friend.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm reminded of something involving Ron Owens, who was a talk show host on KGO. That's the station we came from, and it involved an attorney, and it involved me, and it involved the police.
What?
And I was going to tell David this story. I don't know if he's still there, but probably not. But I didn't want to, sully our conversation with my own issues with the cops. It was the only time that I was ever questioned by the police in an official matter, and it involved Ron Owens. And I will tell the story now because it's a short story, but it is everything that we know about everything in a moment. So here it is.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Many years ago in a galaxy far away, Ron Owens and I used to gamble on football and maybe some other sports too, but I used to just bet on football. And I didn't bet much. I bet $50 a game, $100 a game, maybe $200. I wasn't a big bettor. Ron bet bigger money. So the guy we were betting through, these are the old days before the internet. You're literally calling a guy and saying, give me the Ravens -4, give me the Rams +3, I'll take the Niners -2.5. The guy was in the East Bay, lived in Oakland, and ran his whole operation there. His name was Phil. So Phil is our bookie for a couple of years, maybe a few years. One day, Phil gets raided by the cops, and they grab all of his stuff, and all of his names, and we get a call from Phil saying, hey, I just want to let you know the cops were here, but don't worry, they didn't get any of your names. They got my horse racing wagering list. They didn't even get the list of my players who are betting sports. 2 days later, we get a call from the San Jose Vice Cops.
Oh, wow.
Of course, they did get all of the names. Phil was lying to us. But
this is what happens when you associate with the people doing things illegal.
So Ron calls me and says, hey, this is what we should do. We should get a lawyer, and because the cops want to talk to us, and then we go down to the cops and we tell them what happened. The lawyer, we meet with the lawyer, and then we'll go to the cops. I said, geez, Ron, I don't have a lot of money. A lawyer's expensive. I mean, Ron was a big deal. Ron was, he was the Mac Daddy, right?
Sure.
I was not. I mean, I was on Cron. I was doing the weather. I was making okay money. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't have money set aside for some. Especially, I'm a little guy. I can't believe I'm not going to get a lawyer why? Because I'm betting $50 and $100 on a football game. But Ron said, look, man, this is the thing. You don't want to get into this, and before you know it, you'll be in the paper. It'll smear your name. But I said, okay, all right. I mean, I hadn't been arrested at all. They just wanted to talk
Owens
to
and
us.
Mark Thompson caught in gambling probe.
Yeah. So Ronnie is my older brother, and so he's really smart. And so I said, okay. So we split a lawyer, and then I can't remember meeting the lawyer or whatever, but I go to San Jose Vice Cops. We meet and drive down to San Jose, and then we're in a room.
You guys are hilarious.
And so I am there meeting with the San Jose Vice Cops, and in the back of the room is the lawyer. Now, in this world, I am expecting the lawyer to intercede.
Sure.
At some point, you want the lawyer to make this whole situation better. Do something to justify these thousands I'm giving you. I remember it was $3,000.
I'm sorry, my client can't answer that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
By the way, there was I was totally honest. So I was betting $50, $100 a game. I would call to Phil, and I would give him the information, blah, 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 blah. So, long story longer, the lawyer didn't say anything the entire time. That's why I asked David, do you say anything in that, or do you just kind of sit there and you're in the room? And at the end of it, everything was fine. I mean, we weren't charged in any way. But that ended up being a check I had to write to a lawyer who just showed up, said nothing. I got a copy of the transcript. I still have it somewhere. And it was just an episode. And now we said, we Hutto said, whatever you do, don't tell anybody about this. Don't say anything about this. And of course, now we talk about it all the time. I think Ron and I have told the story on the air, I think on KGO. But the lawyer said nothing through the entire thing. But it was important to Ron that we get a lawyer. So there's that.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I did have a related story that I'd like to do, Albert, before the end of the show. Do you mind if I quickly throw down do you have Bowling with Biden, or do you not have that?
Let me see. And I do. Yep, I'm ready.
Here we go. Let's go bowling with Biden.
Live from White House Lanes, it's Bowling with Biden.
It's go time! This man's gonna win a lot of political offices.
Now, here's your Bowling with Biden host, Mark Thompson.
After his conviction on 3 felony firearm charges, Hunter Biden left federal court in Delaware with the Secret Service detail that hasn't been spoken of a lot. He is provided a Secret Service detail as the son of the president. You may be curious. Will this change the Secret Service obligation to protect Hunter Biden? Will this court ruling, will this verdict? The chief of communications for the U.S. Secret Service says Hunter Biden's Secret Service protection will remain unchanged despite today's judicial outcome. They are not, the Secret Service, required to protect the children of a sitting president who are over 16, but they have traditionally done so. Hunter Biden, whose Secret Service code name, does anybody know his code name?
No.
And everybody in the Secret Service world who being protected, they all have a code name. His code name is Captain, is what we're looking for. Captain. He will almost certainly still have that detail when he returns to court for sentencing. And if he gets time in federal prison, the Secret Service will be faced with the question of how to protect someone who is behind bars. This may be a first. I mean, if Donald Trump, if he on July 11th is sentenced to time, David Katz and pretty much all legal pundits have said it's very unlikely to not going to happen. But if they both got jail time, you'd have a situation facing the Secret Service on 2 counts. But should Biden lose the upcoming election while his son is indeed incarcerated, Hunter might go into prison with the Secret Service detail, but then would lose the Secret Service detail because Trump would be the new president.
I think they have to build a Secret Service prison. They have to build a special one. And wouldn't it be weird if Trump and Hunter were in there together?
Yeah, that would be odd. That would be odd without the Secret Service.
Yeah.
But this looks to be just one more issue that we've never dealt with before, and that is bowling with Biden.
That's all for this edition.
There's your new later.
But join us again next time for Bowling with Biden.
I can't believe it. We're done, Albert. Is there anything I need to do, Albert, before we leave?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people to thank.
Is there? Well, let's start thanking. Is Albert still with the show?
Albert, thank you.
I don't know where he is. I think he fell asleep in his chair.
I see him. So,
my connection's been dropping in and out of the show, so.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, buddy. Sorry. Don't panic. Do I have people to thank? I don't want to neglect my obligation to thank people. We've had a lot of people who've been involved in the show, and thank you very much, everybody who has contributed and supported the show. I'll remind you, Patreon and PayPal is the way to support the show on an ongoing basis. Clarence Thomas needs to have a going out of business sale.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Everyone else will thank you tomorrow, I promise.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Kim is over at the After Party Live channel. Till tomorrow on Friday Fabulous Florida. Bye-bye.